we have with us Devdutt Pattanaik, who is an author, speaker, illustrator, mythologist. He has written 30 books, his latest book being Ramayana versus Mahabharata, My Playful Comparison. He has also written 600 columns over the past 20 years of relevance of mythology in modern time. Currently, he consults corporations on leadership and governance and TV channels on mythological serials.
Anuja Chauhan is an army brat, born in Meerut Cantonment and educated in Meerut, Delhi and Melbourne. She has worked in advertising for over 17 years and is credited with many popular campaigns, including PepsiCo's Ye Dil Mange More, Mera Number Kab Aayega, Oye Bubbly, and also Dar Ke Aage Jeet Hai. She is the author of 4 best-selling novels. We present Devdutt Pattanaik in conversation with Anuja Chauhan on the origins of 64 yoga asanas.
Hi everybody, so good to see you all here, and Devdutt also, who has just made it by the skin of his teeth. His flight landed I think barely 35 minutes ago and he got in here, so we can go right away into it. I've read the book and I loved it, the book that we're talking about today, 64 asanas. And I did want to kick this off, Devdutt, by talking about how, yoga is so trendy. And like we have Lululemon yoga pants retailing for thousands of dollars. And we have like Ryan Gosling and Madonna and Jennifer Aniston and everyone doing yoga. We have a National Yoga Day. But somewhere I just feel that this is a little, we are reaching for very low-hanging fruit over here, It's all about fitness and flexibility is really our goals when we set out to do yoga. And that what I sense from this book is that you're trying to make us aware that there are roots to yoga that go much deeper than, just these goals. And there are rewards to be gotten by researching and finding those roots. So could you talk about that?
You see what I kept seeing this, when you say yoga, then you have, you want to show yoga. You don't want to hear yoga. Everybody wants to show yoga, so you have people in these positions which can't be achieved easily. Politicians trying hard to achieve those positions, so getting Bollywood actresses to do it. And they're all wearing these very tight clothes. Or if you don't have a good body, then you wear loose cotton fabrics, from Fab India or something like that. And what happens is a visual thing. It's a visual thing, and of course it has value. Any exercise has value. All stretching has value. All breath control and coordination has value. But it is a part of the story. It's part of the story. Yoga is a tradition. It's been around in India for a long time, and it has different meanings. And I wanted people to become aware. So this book is not about yoga asanas. Although there are pictures, I've used that as a springboard. So people will see the asana like Kashyapasana or a Marichi asana and say that, okay, what does Marichi mean? In fact, that's the origin of the story. I got this American yoga teacher, and he says he was a US Marine. And he said, yoga saved my life, I learned yoga, I'm very happy with yoga, but I think there's more to yoga than the asanas. I keep hearing these funny names which I can't understand. And he tried to understand them and figure out the root of these words, like Salabhasan and all these asanas. He said, will you help me? I got a mail one day saying that, will you help me write this book? Will you write this book? So I said, no, I said, okay, I'll write it if you give me the asanas. So give me the photographs of what you want. And so he came up with these asanas and we selected 64. And the whole idea was to tell stories. And through stories, make people aware of ideas beyond the asana itself. And I think that was an exercise, and even when I was writing, I was shocked at how much information there is. You have stories about yoginis, you have stories about rishis, you have stories about animals, birds, plants, folk tales. Not just Shiva and Vishnu and the big guys in mythology, but the smaller characters out there. And I think that was fun, just putting them together and giving them a form. So 64 is what I chose.
So there's good news for not very fit people also. Like yoga has so much to offer, even if you're just there for the stories and all the nice juicy stuff. So what I found really interesting, and what we're talking about today especially, is about the rishis in yoga. And the whole thing of, we're all aware of the Great Bear in the sky, and we've seen the Saptarishi constellation, but I wasn't aware about the yogic connect, and the whole thing of like there's this great giant joint family, if you will, that you talk about. So if you could just explain that a little to us.
So, rishis are present in all the stories. They're like, it's like if you're doing any Indian dish, you have to do the tadka, right? So there is a tadka in it. So I think rishis are the tadka in mythology. They keep coming. Whenever it gets boring, suddenly they'll appear and give you a boon or a curse. And they all look like Dumbledore. They all have these long beards and they have a staff in their hand.
Gandalf the Grey.
Gandalf, and standard. But that's honestly, the texts don't describe them that way. They're just described as, the word rishi comes from drishti, those who can see more than other people. And you typically have these 7 rishis who become the primal rishis. And if you look at ancient civilizations around the world, they always speak of a collective of wise men. So you have Sapta Rishi, or you will have in Egyptian mythology, you have the Ennead. If you go to Mesopotamian mythology, you will have something called the Anunnaki. There's always this collective of men, usually men. And Saptarishi is become very popular, and the names keep changing. There is no standard name. But what is interesting about Saptarishi, which is not there in the book, but I thought I'll share it in this group, is astronomically, if you want to figure out where the pole star is, apparently the pole star is not very clear in a cloudy sky or in every season, but what is always clear is the Great Bear constellation. And the Great Bear constellation, if you look carefully, looks like a question mark. But the ancient Indians didn't see it as a question mark, they saw it as a ladle. As a ladle. So question mark and ladle look similar, right? The kachi. So the outer rim of the ladle is connected, if you draw a straight line, comes to the pole star. And around the year, if you track the movement of the of the Great Bear constellation around it, it takes these 4 directions, that if you map it, it looks like the swastik symbol. So they say the swastik symbol has its origin in the central point is pole star, and the 4 sides are the signs of the Sapta Rishis. So these were clearly related to something to do with goodness, health, because what is swastika? It comes from the word su asti, let good things happen. And the whole idea is these 7 wise men have access to the wisdom of India. All the knowledge that we have come from, it's a way of saying it. And the origin being that in the beginning, when the world just came into being, the first being was called Prajapati or Brahma. He's called Brahma and Prajapati, and there are many, many stories of it, but broadly the story is that he was very insecure. He's suddenly scared, he's all alone, he's the first creature on earth. So the first emotion he experiences is of fear and the loneliness, and he doesn't know what to do. And in fear, from his mind, so from Manas Putra it's called, from his mind come these, his mind or thoughts manifest as creatures we call the Rishis. And they are the Saptarishis. So they are forms that were born out of fear in order to take away his fear. So Saptarishi essentially means the gyan or the wisdom that enables us to get out of fear. So broadly, the job of a Rishi is to enable you to navigate through life, deal with life's challenges, and help you go out beyond it. So all the Rishis are always there, looking wise, meditating. The reason is they're trying to make sense of the world. They are the seers, right? The English translation of the word rishi is seer, jo dekhta hai. And he sees and he understands, and like we do as writers, right? We look at things, we analyze them, we try to make sense of them, we put them in a framework and turn into a story. In the same way, the rishi would look at life and analyze things and put it in the form of a mantra. So they are Manasa Putra, born of the mind, and then they would create these mantra to help the mind. Man. So the word man is common. So mana, manu, manava, brahma, brahmana. Every time the word mana keeps coming repeatedly. It's all about the mind and our insecurities and our and everything that they do. Everything that the rishis do has to deal ultimately with enabling us to live a fulfilled life.
Okay, 2 things from what you said. One is, of course, the fact that while these are all men, and it's, how when Brahma was feeling this troubled, and he manifested from his thoughts 7 men.
Yes.
So that's one thing. They form a constellation that looks like a karchi, which is definitely a woman's tool, but they're all men. So one question on that about, why are there no women here? What is that all about? And the other thing I would ask you is that, actually we just do this one first.
Yeah. So the creation of women in Hindu mythology is very amorphous. In the sense, the way, if I'm reading the Bible, it's very clear. There is Adam, there is Eve. The story is very clear. Eve is the mother of all humans. The story is very clear. I don't get such a clear story in the Vedas and the Purans. The men, it's very clear. There is a lotus blooming, Brahma coming, Saptarishis emerging, and suddenly they have wives. And we don't know where there'll be this, then the odd story saying that Brahma split himself into two, or from his head came the Rishis and from his body came the women. But they are almost like afterthoughts, because somebody must have asked the same question, ki, bhaiya, I can't say characters.
Well, to be fair, even in the Bible, there's sort of afterthoughts.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm just saying that if I were to do a comparative analysis, people keep asking me creation or women, and I will never be able to give you pinpoint a single story, very clear story, but they appear. And it's a very interesting story about these 7 women. So it's said that the Sapta Rishis had 7 wives with them. And they were always together. And because you can't perform a yajna without a wife by your side. Okay, so although nowadays politicians, even if they don't have a wife, they can do all kinds of things. But traditionally, you have to be a dampatya. You have to be a pair. And the story goes that one day the women, early in the morning, they woke up. They went to the river to take a bath, so they were wet. And they came near the fire god to offer their offerings early in the morning. And the fire god looked at these beautiful women drenched in wet clothes, very Bollywood. And they're looking at these women and he starts feeling desire for them. And his heat, they say the light and the heat touches them. And the story goes that, there are many versions of it. I'll give the simplified version of it. Of the 7 women, one of them had worn a Mangal Sutra. But the others had not. And so the husband said that, I think you have been unfaithful to us. Yes. And the 6...
No, you're cutting ahead slightly. What? So, so there's Agni radiating heat and hotness.
Yes.
And you have 6 of these ladies who don't have Mangal Sutras.
Yes.
And therefore then what happened?
They get hot.
So the Mangal Sutra keeps you cool?
Well, it keeps you cool for some time, for some people.
Okay.
Listen, this is mythology. Don't apply logic to this. It's supposed to be fun. You have got men born of your thoughts.
Exactly.
It's
women
mythology.
give birth, right? How can you take that away from us? We give birth.
So,
Suddenly Brahma's having 7 children out of his thoughts.
Yes.
I'm
7 men.
7 men, exactly.
But then the wives, this is where gender politics really emerges. And then I have a hypothesis about this, because these 6 women leave their husbands because they have been unjustly accused. And they said, we don't want to be with you. And they go to the eastern side of the sky. So the northern side of the sky, you'll see the Great Bear constellation. But on the eastern side, you see what is called the Kritika constellations. The Kritika Nakshatra. These are 6 yoginis, 6 women who are considered to be autonomous, independent women, who will not be. They're the Pleiades constellation. So across the world, the Pleiades constellation is associated with 6 women. And the stories vary. Always there'll be a 7th sister who stays back. So it's a consistent, but the thing is, it's a feminine constellation. You have a masculine constellation. These women, you could say, are the first women who decided to live autonomous lives. They are the first yoginis. So when you talk about, popular god, especially in South India, is Kartikeya, and he is said to have 6 mothers who took care of him. These are the Kritikas, from whom he is called the Kartikeya. And they don't have husbands. They don't have a man in their life. And there are many, many stories between the Brahmanas, Vedic literature, and the Mahabharata and the Skanda Puran, which talks about these women. And this idea is a recurring theme in Indian mythology of 7 independent women, 6 and 7. So Yogini, Saptamatrika, 7 sisters, 6 sisters. They live in the forest. They're called Saptakannagi. They are the 7 girls. They're 7 Pattini. They are the 7 wives. In all forests across India, from Kashmir down to Kanyakumari, to Odisha, Maharashtra, everywhere you go, you'll find these 7 independent women who live in the jungle, forest. They are feared. They are like these magicians, sorceresses. They are the counter to the Saptarishi. And Saptarishi has a star next to it called Alcor, 1 star, which is called Arundhati. She is the faithful wife. But these women don't fall into that category. So it's very difficult when you ask people, were they unfaithful? And the answer will be no, they're beyond these categories. You can't apply So it's all, I think it's proto-feminism emerging, because you have a whole body of women whose literature is hidden because they were not writing it down. And since most literature is written by men, we don't get access to these women, but they make their presence felt. So across India, like if you go to Shirdi, if you're driving down to Shirdi, you will see in Maharashtra, you will see Sati Asara temples. Sati Asara temples are these 7 rocks on the ground, and women usually go there when they have problems with menstruation, childbirth, when they have hysterical fits. So these forest primal goddesses who will not be bound by civilization. So there's something wild about them. And they appear with the Saptarishis, but they are the 6 yoginis. So Arundhati stays back. So she becomes the good wife. The in South India they have the Tali. Famous, that's her thing. Yeah. But there are this whole bunch of women who don't wear it. And they don't have husbands. There is never a husband associated. Their children are collective, their lovers are collective. They are called Matrikas, Mahavidyas, Chausashta Yogini. So if you go to Odisha, if you go to Bhubaneswar, there is a tantric temple called as the Chausashta Yogini temple, where there are 64 women in abandoned 8th century, built in 8th century by a queen of the Kesari dynasty. And you find, if you go to Puri temple during Dasara, there is this Gosai temple worships, which looks like Durga statues, but they're not. They're called Gosai women. And these women are very different from the Durga statue. Well, Durga statue has something very majestic about it, and she looks at the devotee. The Gosani women will look at the demon she's killing. And these gigantic statues are brought once a year around the Puri temple. So when you come out of the Puri temple, you will see these gigantic women holding weapons in their hands, slashing these asuras. And you see this image, and these are the yoginis. And really this book is about telling the stories of these yoginis. In fact, the word Chausasht, 64, is talking about, because the moment it says Chausasht, it becomes Chausasht Yogini. And 64 qualities in the ancient times. Sorry, I'm just sort of taking this because the story goes that to be a king you need 32 qualities. Battis gun, because you have 32 teeth. So the king has to have 32 qualities, but a courtesan has to have 64 qualities. And the courtesan is a crude English word. It's not the word which was used before. They would use the word yogini, they would use the word nati. These were women who were independent, who lived independent lives, who had independent lovers, who had children. They were matriarchal. They were not bound by society. And they knew 64 arts. So that is one of the reasons I wrote the book, is to draw attention to these oral stories. Part of it is sort of legitimized by Sanskrit literature, but really they're part of folk tales. We call them folk tales, giving them a lower status. But in Odisha and all that, when you keep talking about these Dhobini and Maluni and my mother, I've grown up with these stories. And I one day realized that, my mother would always talk to them as Jogi and Jogini. And she would keep using this word to the Jogo. She would use not Yog, which is a very English anglicized way of saying it. She would say Jogo, Jogini, and she would use these words in very magical, powerful. It is not this yoga, has this kind of a sanitized, sterile sound to it. When my mother would say Jogo, and she would keep using this word, my whole house, and she said, today is the Jogini Puja. And somehow there was something magical happening in the house at that time. My mother was in charge at that time. She would take her bath. We weren't allowed to touch her on that day. She would be performing these rituals with the yoginis. And I realized as a mythologist, I don't see any book talking about it. Yeah. I mean, there are people who write about it in academic spaces, but there is no literature. And this is the yoginis. These women, the primal women, are for me the yoginis.
And these women are feared, right? They're feared.
We don't know. They're approached and feared. It's like, the word fear has to be understood carefully. The concept of holiness in all traditions is like the sun. You love the sun, but you also fear the sun, because if you go close to the sun, it'll burn you. So fear has to be understood in that sense of the term, that it is full of so much power that you can't handle it. Oh my God.
And also
the yoginis are here.
Yeah. And also a sense that if a woman is untethered, in a sense, with no Mangal Sutra, and is out wild there, free range vagina, as somebody put it really well, whether you're watching popular Star Plus TV shows or any other form of popular popular culture that we see, this is always somebody who people are scared of and people want to shun, but people are very fascinated by. All the ratings come from them on anything. So,
the powerful woman and this whole idea of domesticity. There is always these three groups of women in ancient Indian tradition. Especially, I mean, it's very clearly presented in Tamil literature for the first time. If you want to understand this, the earliest literary clarity comes from Tamil literature, not from Sanskrit literature, which talks about the free woman, the married woman, and the nun. So there is the monk, the bhikkhuni, the Jain the Buddhist nun. So it is almost as if the woman without a man, the woman with one man, and the woman with many men. So this is the categorization.
Are we giving too much power to men now suddenly?
Abhi kya kare? You know, so the men are also categorized in the same way. To be fair, the man with many women, the man with one woman, and the man with no women. So the yogi is supposed to be, so it's opposite. The yogi is supposed to be the man with no women around him, and the yogini is supposed to be the woman with any man around him. She can handle everything. So it's these two extremes of, if you were to draw a line and on one side you put male celibacy, on the other side you put female sexuality, then yogi will come in this direction and yogini will come in that direction, and they complete the spectrum.
And again, very interesting because there was this one story, it was about Chudala, and which is like, it would be lovely if you share that story. And again, there's this notion in there, very matter-of-factly stated, that women cannot, because women cannot control their desires, which I thought was quite radical, considering nowadays it's all, boys will be boys and women are supposed to be have their sexuality very much under their control.
So, people don't realize when you read Sanskrit literature and when you read old, not just Indian, but across the world, the traditional belief is women have unbridled sexuality and it has to be controlled. So this is the old narrative. The new narrative is women don't have, unless they're deviants. So that is
what happened? How did this change?
Because now you have convinced the world of this one lie, you move to the other lie. Because now you don't have to sell it anymore. Because this idea of the woman being, even now, the goddess temple, if you go to Kerala, there are these rituals which are followed, where the goddess is feared, and a sexuality, if you read the poetry about a sexuality, it is, depending on how you read it, it is macabre, it is vulgar, it is obscene, or it is powerful. Depending on who is reading these verses. And you find this across the world. So for example, in Greek mythology, I'll digress a little bit to Greek mythology, Hera and Zeus go to a man called Tiresias, who is blind, and say that who has greater pleasure. And a similar story is told in Mahabharata also, of Bhangashvana, about Yudhishthira looks at Bhishma, who has never been married, and says that, please tell me who has greater sexual pleasure, men or women. And Bhishma is looking, I think he would have chuckled at that time. He said, why are you asking me? But because you seem to know everything, you should know this. And he says, I'll tell you the story of Bhangashvana, of the only creature who lived half his life as a man and half his life as a woman. And she tells without doubt that it is women who get more pleasure than men and therefore have to be restrained. See, it's the ironical way in which it is presented. The woman gets more pleasure and therefore has to be restrained. This line is a consistent theme, and which is why the yoginis are always, whenever I talk of yogini, we will talk about yoni, we will talk about a womb. When you talk about the yogis, you will talk about virya, you will talk about a semen. The whole idea being, and this is what is not talked globally, so when you talk about yoga, they will say that, oh, this is yoga and that is tantra. And you make this classification, so pure Vedic yoga, and barbaric, primitive, tantra is something to be shunned. But really there is, in traditional scriptures, they don't divide that. It's not this kind of division is, depending on the school of thought, different people will use different divisions. But broadly you will have the yoginis on one side. On the other side is the yogi is continuously aspiring to be celibate.
Yes.
And that celibacy gives him magical powers. So he becomes, that is why you will see many of our politicians are celibate or claim to be celibate. Because there's a magic in our minds, in the cultural Indian mind. Celibacy is associated with magic. It's called Urdhva Retas, which is the you develop power because your semen moves upwards. It's a visual imagery, and it says it goes and gives you these ojas and gives you these magical powers which are called siddhis, which is what makes these yogis powerful. See, the wise man was not appreciated only for being wise. His wisdom was associated with power. He was also powerful. See, when we look at Dumbledore or Gandalf, we are not really interested in their words of wisdom. We are interested in the fact that they can do magic. We love magic. So the source of magic was celibacy. And on the other side, you have these women whose magic comes by controlling the men. So their sexuality, they would say, they were seen as what is called succubi and incubi. They would take your sexual energy for their benefit. So you should stay away from them. You find this in Buddhist literature, for example. When you read the Vinaya Pitaka, the Buddhist monk, earlier the monks would not wear clothes. They would be Digambara. Because you've given up everything in the world, how can you have clothes? But the Buddhist monks would wear clothes because they would say that women will not be able to, because they are so sexually hypersexual, when they see a beautiful sage who is made beautiful through meditation, they will jump on you. And so it's like vampire in the reverse.
Yes.
So and to protect yourself, you have to cover yourself and don't walk at night, because all these women.
This is all getting more and more unhealthy, right? I mean,
But think about it. It's a society where men stay
people
indoors
are
and women are
seriously
outside.
repressed.
Huh? It's a society where women are wandering in the streets and men are inside the house. Bahar mat jana beta.
हाँ,
वो तुझे
आपको
चुड़ैल खा
चुड़ैल
जाएगी
खा
तुझे।
जाएगी।
And this is really being talked about because I remember this memory of mine by my mother when we would go to goddess temples. When I was a boy, she would never let me enter the temple. She would say, no, goddess is too powerful, she'll eat you. And I would like, what do you mean by that? And today I realize this whole idea of, and you find this repeated references to the young boy being devoured by the goddess. There is this almost fear of her power. So power, sexuality all coalesce. They come together.
So women's sexuality, when it is unbridled and out there, seems to make them more powerful.
Yes.
And men, if they keep it all inside and channel it upwards, which sounds really unhealthy to me, but whatever, I'll keep an open mind. And it goes up and then it opens the third eye and stuff. So men, if they refrain from sex, become more powerful.
Yes.
And women, if they go out there and
that's the balancing act that happens. So when you read the scriptures, they will all. So if you read the Shiva stories, the Shiva story is always about the goddess telling Shiva to get married. If you look at the Shiva Puran is the key theme over there is the hermit should become the householder. Then a balance is achieved. So people always talk about taming of the shrew. If you hear the plays are about the shrew being tamed. But here even the hermit is being made the householder. So the household is seen as a safe space where the man's desire to be celibacy is broken and the woman's unbridled sexuality is contained. So the grahastha jivan, which comes in the middle, is considered to be the middle path between the two. That's why I said no sex, lots of sex, and sex only for babies. So that's how the story goes, and therefore when you read the Kama Shastras, they are always talking about Shiva, and he's saying that why do we need babies? He doesn't understand the point. And the goddess is saying, no, you must have babies. In a way she's saying you have to be grounded. And this idea of freedom is almost a reverse to what is happening today. Our conversations today is the reverse of what is there in the scriptures. In the scriptures, the women are the ones who are out there, who are flowing. That's why they described as rivers. The metaphor for women is always the river, and the metaphor for men is the mountain. So rishis are always on mountain tops, and that is a visualization. The goddess goes to the mountain top to bring him down like the river. So the river, all the rivers are considered women because they're constantly flowing. So they're coming, so Ganga lands on Shiva's head, and she says, come to the ground, come to the earth. So it's at a metaphorical level, this is talking about balance.
But at a metaphorical level, to me it seems deeply misogynistic, frankly. It seems like women have no other purpose in their life than to go around falling on men's heads. And I mean, you could just be like happily going in your river and enjoying the scenery. You don't have to go and seduce the mountains.
See, until the 20th century, most literature was written by men. So naturally, I mean, if you have read, post-structuralism, postmodern,
yeah.
the this obsession with text, which is there nowadays. We look at a text. I keep saying that 90% to 99% of all texts all over the world are written by men. So you have to wear that filter all the time.
Yeah.
It is written by a man. It is not written by a woman. One. But let's grant that some of the men, not all of the men, but some of the men were not misogynist. They were not all men by virtue of being men are misogynist. Just as all women by virtue of being women are not feminist. So if we see that, then you start looking at it as a metaphor. You start looking at the Rishis as your mind and the yoginis as your body. And your body has 64 things which are drawing you towards the external world, and your mind which is pulling you back. And there's a tug of war happening between your mind and your
Yeah,
body.
but again, I guess, sorry, I'm just seeing it with that lens all the time. Because again, it sounds like, oh, you get to play the bigger, cooler part, right? You are the mind. And
That's because you have privileged the mind over the body.
Yes, but...
Because you have a nice
again,
body and I
because
have an ugly body, I privilege the mind.
No, but my mind is also very nice. How do you know? Again, you say how. You know, the most popular story about that we know about yoga and is about Vishwamitra, and how Vishwamitra was the king and he wanted to be a sage, and he goes up there and he's doing his tapasya or whatever, and then Menika sent to seduce him, deflect him, take him off that path. And again that's a narrative you see repeated. It has so many parallels. You know, if you look at Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, or you look at Virat Kohli and Anushka Sharma, or you just look at a man reading his newspaper in the morning in this very Vishwamitra way, and his wife is trying to distract him by talking about other things. So that thing repeats again and again and again. And
See, it depends on how you want to see it. If you see it, as I said, stories can be seen in two ways, literally and metaphorically. When you see it literally, it is about men and women. When you see about metaphorically, it is about form and formlessness. So you have the two choices. Now you want to privilege formlessness over form is your choice. But as I said, you can always do this. It will never end. This conversation will
but
never end.
formlessness is eternal and form is
Also eternal.
Tell more.
It is always changing. So in Indian philosophy, there is no Shiva without Shakti, and there is no Shakti without Shiv. And this division is very clear. The mind is useless without the body, because it is only through the body can it connect with the... That's why yoga plays a very important role. Yoga is about connection. The word yoga means connection. When you say viyog, it means separation. So the moment you say connection, by definition you have taken two. You have to have two things to connect. You can't have one. So connect, disconnect, connect. So the purpose of yoga is to connect two things. What two things are we talking about? Are we talking mind and body? Are we talking about you and society? Are you talking about you and him or her? Any two things in this world when I want to connect. And as we know, all forces have attraction and repulsion within it. The same idea is explained in philosophy as saying when two objects come to each other, there's pravritti and nivritti. Pravritti is attraction, I want the other, I want to consume the other, and nivritti, I want to withdraw from the other. And this, at a framework level, is consistent in Indian thought. You'll constantly have what is called garam khana and thanda khana. Now, if you say garam and thanda, which of the two is male and female? You know, in India, when you say sun and the moon, most cultures will say sun is male and moon is female. But in India, sun and moon both are male. Chandrama, he is a beautiful god, and the beautiful god Surya is also the... So where are the women? The women are the stars.
No, I thought Dharti, sorry.
No, Dharti also. So stars, now you say which is above and below. So this is complex because, for example, the sky in most cultures is male and the earth is female, but not in Egyptian mythology. In Egyptian mythology, the goddess of the sky, Nut, is the goddess of the sky, and the goddess of earth is Geb, the male. So it's not consistent across this kind of divisions that we... It's what has happened is that it's also, we have now seen the world from a Victorian point of view, which is very male, female. So we have to keep removing these conditionings. And when you start looking at it, as I said, you will get what you want in this thing. But Indian philosophy, you see, you can't worship a god without a goddess. It is the goddess who grants him divinity. That's why Shiva is distant and will not be worshipped till she brings him down. So the whole idea of it's only Hanuman is being worshipped only in the last few hundred years, but it's always, he was the threshold god outside. But you'll always have Ram with Sita, Krishna with Radha, Shiva with Shankar.
No, but that's, sorry, I mean, we're going off on some tangent very far away from yoga. But, you know, anyone will argue that Ram is the main and Sita is like the supporting role.
No, that's because you are reading RSS too much. See, this is the RSS influence on you. Because RSS says Jai Shri Ram does not include women in it. But traditionally you will say Jai Siya Ram. You cannot, it is ashubh to have a statue of Ram without Sita. It is, look at the economy.
No, but they've done that. I mean, they've sundered the yoni from the ling and everything. I mean, all the statues.
All the statues of Ram and RSS, there is no woman. Krishna is shown without Radha. Shiva is shown without Shakti. I can show you, I have written papers on this.
These are like, they're all incels, right? I mean, like...
No, they are these big posters. You look at a Ravi Verma, which is there in the temples of people's houses. Shiva is always with wife and children. Ram is always Pattabhishekam. Wife is sitting next to him. Radha, Krishna in the Gangetic plain, you will never worship Krishna without Radha. In South, you will worship him with Rukmani. So this is a very important idea. It's Dampatya. You have to have the female. I keep giving these lectures telling that people it's Amangala. It's considered only female. There are temples of only female and there will be male Bhairavas around her. Because otherwise the power is to be contained. But the same applies to the male also. What has happened is when we see it from a Victorian lens, we start seeing in Hinduism it's very clear, without the female energy and whatever, it's metaphoric, it's like the body. You cannot, that's why yoga values the body so much. Tantra comes from tan and mantra comes from man. Now which is more important, mantra or tantra? They'll say, dono mantra tantra chahiye. Now mantra tantra is formlessness. Now depending on which language you use, we have not told a single story and she's in 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. No worries.
See, this is the power of the goddess. But
She just held it up and we have to listen to her.
So, no, the thing is, this is something that we don't realize. And when when I talk to my RSS friends and I'm like listening to them, I think Ashubh, Amangal, the Barbad kar doge desh ko, because there is no woman. You cannot sit on the throne without the goddess. I said, what is this Bajrang Bali all the time? Where is Sita Maiya? And there is no woman. It is extremely inauspicious. And I can be
Well, some people would argue that, RSS people like mostly don't really score too many women and probably don't have any jobs.
I am looking at the economy. Lakshmi is not coming. Yeah, Lakshmi kahan hai? Are the arts flourishing? Where is Saraswati? There is no Saraswati. What is going on? Only old men giving some speeches everywhere. Ugly old men in positions of power. See, as a gay man, I can at least comment on male beauty, Sorry. Very poor turnout. I wish I was in Canada. But I'm telling you, really ugly men. It's Ashubha. When you describe Ram's, if you read the Sanskrit poetry on Ram, they describe every organ of his body. And I mean every organ. Every organ.
Okay.
RSS will never read it. They'll get a nervous breakdown. Because he describes every part of his body above and below the navel is described, and only then will the goddess arrive and bring prosperity. When you read Jayadev, a contemporary of Jayadev writes about how the goddess Lakshmi has to be invoked. When in her eyes there's desire for Vishnu, who takes the form of Mohini. So she takes a female form and she finds that female form of a husband attractive. To her I do Jaya Jaya Jaya. These are all tantric verses which come in the 12th. By calling it tantric, we protect ourselves, right? Immediately.
Yeah.
Vedic nahi hai, tantric hai. But now they can't because they'll be lynched.
Yes.
But they have no use. You only have use for one Rishabha bull, that is the Shivji, wo Nandi Bail jo hota hai, and baki Gai, Go Mata. Because cow, paneer, everything comes from her.
So going back to the very first thing that we started off with, if Brahma would have sent up 7 Rishinis, it would have probably...
Rishikas, they were called Rishikas, and but they are the yoginis. I feel this is the invisible tradition of India. The invisible tradition, because again, form and formless, and it's ironical that the goddesses who are associated with form exist in a formless way as the tantric goddesses. So every village in India will have yoginis and Kuladevis, and what is a Kuladevi? You can access your lineage to that womb, if I were to use the word. Every temple is called Garbhagriha. And on top of the temple there is a pot kept, because the pot is the symbol of civilization. The pit in which the fire was lit. So even when you're doing that swaha, 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 the fire altar was considered the woman. And the fire was considered the male. So you can't there is constant reference to not just male and female, but also the queer. So there's always male, female, queer. Every time the classification will be threefold. That's why Shiva has a Trishul. It's not just male and female, it's not binary. There has to be something in between to balance the two, and which balances it in various forms. So you have this continuous fluid conversation. You know, that's what I say, garam thanda khana. If you look at the Chudala story when we're talking about it, it's again about the man not being able to see that his wife is brilliant. You have the story in the Ramayana where Janaka is unable to handle the fact that Sulabha is brilliant. And Sulabha says, why are you looking at my body? Look at my brilliance. And that's a problem today in the corporate world, and everywhere you go, women are seen from a body. The Tantra plays a more important role, not the mind. And that's why I think the economy is where it is.
And guys, now we can take questions from the audience if you all have. That's okay. We read a bit.
We can't hear you.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
About the documentation of Chausath Yoginis. Okay? So there they have documented.
Where is this?
Vedaghat near Jabalpur.
The Madhya Pradesh one. Yeah, the Madhya Pradesh one is documented. So, the only one with iconography which is very classical is in Bhubaneswar. Every other place, either they put Shiv pinned or it's empty, and there's one more place with statues, but they are, I don't remember where it is, but there's four temples have been identified. Oh, by the way, the Parliament of India is designed around the Chausath Yogini temple. So when only men sit inside a female temple, problems start.
Second question is about the narrative regarding sun and moon. Different tribes have different, we can say, figuring about those two characters. For example, I have studied Nimadi, Bundeli, Malvi. So it is not one narrative.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the major Puranic traditions only. I'm not talking about the folklore. Once you go into the tribal traditions, the local traditions, you will get many, many things. But generally in India, as in astrology, for example, Jyotisha Shastra, Chandra is male, Soma is male. In Japanese tradition, the sun is female. So in Japanese, Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, is female. So
We kindly request the audience to stick to one question per person. There's a little lack of time as of now.
So, thank you.
So, women who interact sexually are considered powerful, whereas men who don't interact sexually are considered powerful. So, where does masturbation fit in this picture? When you consider masturbation, you don't see the difference between men and women.
No. You do see a difference in the tantric school of thought. Women can, men can't.
But the question is regarding power. Where does
See, don't take these things so literally. Unless
No,
you're doing a PhD thesis and you want an entry into Harvard or then you should say Indian men are horrible and women are then you'll get your PhD thesis. But it's you can't simplify these things. They are very, very complex. So although I'm because I have a lot of time, I'm quickly telling an answer. But if you were to write it in an academic way, it is never so simple. So power is there with women. The way you have made a clear, simple binary to suit your question. So I will question that framework itself. Right? That framework itself very cleverly trivializes and victimizes women. Your question itself is victimizing women because you have, I'm just playing a game with you, which I do with everyone.
Both women and men both masturbate, so it's not an issue.
Yeah, but fluid loss. The problem is not masturbation, the problem is fluid loss. Men lose semen. Women don't lose menstrual blood. That is that problem. The reason why women are seen different from men is that whether you like it or not, every month the assumptions, remember these people didn't have access to the modern medicine we have. They saw women's red blood as women's seed, man's semen as white seed. They said man can control his semen voluntarily. They did not know that nightfall happens, what is called swapna dosh. And they saw women because every month they menstruate every month. See, you can judge them. That's because you have the benefit of the 21st century. If your grandmother believed in it, you can make fun of your grandmother. But that comes from a position of power that you have, which means you are victimizing the past. So be very careful of, I always been careful of modern people who victimize the past and look down on the past. They worked with the knowledge they had. But remember, they believed that if the Reds, they talked more powerful things than most people. They said, if the red seed is powerful, women are born. If the white seed is powerful, men are born. But if both seeds are powerful, queer people are born. So the ancient traditions made room for the queer, which modern society even today does not. So be careful when you're judging the past.
Devdutt, I've read a lot of your books. Thanks a lot for sharing all your insights.
I can't hear you, even with the mic. Louder, just talk into the mic.
Yeah. So my simple question is, for your own sadhana and abhyas, do you have any personal adhyatmic guru you...
No, I don't believe in gurus.
So you just refer to...
No. Because the greatest guru is inside you.
Yes.
Everybody else outside is a fraud.
Hello, sir here. Good afternoon. I have this, it has been in my mind for a long time. We always describe the form of the deity that we are performing puja to. Like just now you said they describe every part, every organ of the male form or the female form. Now, why is that so? Do we place greater importance to the beauty and hence do we try to reach that?
Excellent question, excellent. Please remember, this is the great battle between form and formlessness. For example, how do you communicate meaning? Now here we have a writer. She has a story in her head. You have a story in your head. Or a thought, a feeling. She feels something when she sees a character. How will Anuja communicate? She needs words. Because she's a writer. If she was a dancer, she would have used her body. If she was a musician, she would have used sound. We have to use something tangible to go to the intangible. So, sagun se nirgun ki yatra.
Yes.
Right? So, this is the journey. She has a feeling. She says, I can feel. You can feel Romeo and Juliet only because of the cadence of Shakespeare. Right? Shakespeare has a way of saying the sound and the words help you experience love.
Right.
That is the same thing what you're doing. When I'm chanting Ram, the words and the visualization is enabling me to experience Ram.
Right.
That is the tantric method. So you will have to see the image. Now you don't need a statue. So in the early days they didn't have statues. They would have the mantra parampara is chant.
Right.
The tantra parampara is see. Look at it. So there is a vigraha.
Right.
You need a statue. Or you would have a geometric form. But the point is to make you, the magic is that you will anubhava, which cannot be captured.
Absolutely.
And that is why that description is so detailed, meticulous. They'll go to the extent of describing the pubic hair of the goddess.
Right.
And if you read it suddenly, you think, what are they doing? But this is what they're doing. They want you to see it in its entirety. You find this even in the Tantric Buddhist traditions. But it died out there. It is not popular. The Dalai Lama will never talk about it. But today, this is how the Vigraha, if you really want to experience Ram, you have to do the chanting in that particular intonation.
Right.
Which is why the gentleman over here used the word guru. In a pre-literal society where written texts were not there, you needed a teacher. Because without a teacher, how do you communicate learning?
Right.
So this is why that form is so important, the word is so important. We should remember, it's like if I want to understand Zoya, I have to read her book to understand her mind, because through her words, I'm experiencing the thought she had. And that is how yoga is being established. So this is yoga, the connection between, which is the essence of Natya Shastra. That's the intent of Natya Shastra, is how do I get into the mind of the creator. So the creator is, she's the creator. She is Brahma at that time. Her Saptarishis are born in her head and they're forming this wonderful swastika in their head, but they're useless until the yoginis come along, sit on her tongue, sit on her fingertips, transforms and takes shape, that you will eat, consume the flavors, the rasas will emerge. And then Zoya will appear in your mind. And depending on the quality of the communication and the quality of reception, Brahma will be experienced. That's what it is.
Thank you so much.
Due to lack of time, we'll have one last question. If you have any extra questions, you can talk to the authors in the author signing area later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Devdutt sir, I have one question for you. From what you've spoken and what I've read in your books, we can all understand that across history, from time unknown, women have always been important in the world, across all mythologies and across all the continents. What happened in the last 100 or 500 years that women got probably demotivated or submerged or less important, and today if you see in every area the diversity percentages are very low, especially even though we have very, very talented women in this world. So what could be, according to you, what is the reason?
I think in many ways, see, if you go to a tribal society or if you go to a potter's house, for example, a traditional potter's house, he can't live, the men and women have complementary roles. There is no one person, when you say potter, both of them will come. Because each one has a different role and together they create the pot. Somebody creates the clay, somebody makes the mix, somebody plays the wheel. So they are together creating this art form and they're transmitting it over generations. This is how traditional models, the moment you start to theorize it, you need a theoretician. The moment you need a theoretician, he starts putting his prejudice into this. So the moment, one of the reasons why the written word creates this problem is because who is writing starts emerging. Or if you are the oral word, who is speaking. So somewhere along the line, the work, when you divided the work, you said, you manage inside the house, I'll manage outside the house. It sounded nice, but it was a clever way of locking you in. And that's what happened. So what was supposed to be complementary roles, one half took advantage of it. And it is, I mean, we can argue why it happened, how it happened. And if you look at various societies, if you go to a Jarua tribe, are they feminist or toxic masculinity? Let's go to the tribes we consider to be uncivilized. And really it's very difficult to figure out because the men are playing a very aggressive role, the women are very different over there, they don't have a pre-literate societies. We can put our structures into it and ask, okay, who is it a male-dominated or female-dominated society? But the entire society revolves around protecting women because their numbers depend on women. The moment you could control fertility, the world changed. So that's what it is. I mean, the other argument given is it is built in human beings because in nature, men don't matter. If you go to nature, nature wants only one man, not all men, because one man is enough to take care of the tribe. So all the other men are considered useless, except the alpha. So culture has reversed it. So all the mediocre men have written these books because they are jealous of the alpha. That's the other metaphorical explanation. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Devdutt and Anuja.
This is not a question. May I take just a moment?
I'm sorry, ma'am. Sir has to leave right now. That's
It's
why.
only a moment. I just want to request for a photo with Pattanaik ji. We have been honored to be in your presence, sir. We have watched a lot of your talks on Netflix, and we have always been,
So you'll honor me by buying my books. So honor me in the best way possible and buy all my books. No photo. Please, I have to rush right now. Please, sorry.